Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for July 20th, 2023. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right, as your host for the evening, let's start with our introductions. All the way to my far left, please.
Gaspol Bimba.
Michael Donlin.
Richard Tripp.
Crystal Morin, Secretary.
Lynn Perkins, Chair.
Craig Corbett, Vice Chair.
Donald Bridges,
Member.
member.
And we have Code Enforcement Officer Robert Mackey, and our clerk, Ginny Rio, is in the back. And a couple other announcements. If you're here for Community Power, you're in the wrong room. That's 207 is a conference going on. And these proceedings are scheduled to terminate at 10 p.m. And please shut off any cell phones, iPhones, iPads, anything that could create a distraction to the proceedings. And in the event of an emergency, please exit directly to the rear of the room, use the stairway, do not use the elevator. Someone can assist you. We won't leave you behind. So that being said, we are set for our first case, which is the James Lavelle, representing the owners of James Yaretz III Revocable Trust, and that is case number 23-117. Good evening, Mr. Lavelle.
Thank you, Chairman.
And of course, we are protocol to ask you to read the record for the application into the record, and then we'll proceed at your leisure.
The application is to subdivide 3.27 acre lot, having 300 feet of frontage, into two lots, each having 150 feet of frontage, creating a rear lot with 2 acres, and leaving the existing home with 1.3 acres. The variance is requested for lot size and for lot size by soils on the existing front lot where the home is. This is quite a unique situation. The building of the new home in the rear would be on a 2-acre lot. It would meet all the requirements for lot sizing by soils and the 2-acre soils.
And can I get you to go right to the application, the 5 criteria?
Okay, I can do that. The lot proposed for the existing home is on an island unto itself. Any additional area would be of no use to it. I'm sure you guys have looked at the plans and realized that the wetland is separating the front lot where the house is from the more buildable land in the rear.
And how do you read to the public interest?
Basically, it is a hardship because of the shape of the land.
Yep.
There are many.
You're looking,
Okay, yeah. Okay. The variance will not be contrary to public interest because the smaller lot is sized similarly to many in the neighborhood as in surrounding and is surrounded by wetlands. There are a number of 1-acre lots in the area, both on Hampstead Road and the side streets, some less than 1 acre. The spirit of the ordinance is observed because this will in no way change the character of the neighborhood. Substantial justice would be done because it would allow the owner to create a new lot meeting the 2-acre zoning size and soils. He's creating the lot so his son can build a house. The values of surrounding properties would not be diminished because building a new home on 2 acres could only improve the value in the neighborhood. There is no substantial enforcement of the ordinance would result in a hardship. The lot proposed, as I stated before, the existing home is on an island unto itself, and other land would be of no value. The proposed use is a reasonable one because it would allow for a reasonable, productive use of the man's property. And this criteria is not established. In this particular case, the rear portion of the lot, the upland, is of no use to the existing home, which will remain on 1.27 acres.
You reference the soils.
Yes.
Would you like to elaborate on that? And it's
The soils by lot sizing, I have that criteria here. State lot sizing, both lots, including the front one, comply with state lot sizing. I have, the town lot sizing requirement is a little more restrictive than the state. The rear lot is 1.59 times its required size by Derry soils. The front lot is 0.78 by Derry soils.
It's .78
Right.
compared to dairy soils?
Yes.
Okay.
However, if you were to add any land across the wetland to it, in order to make the lot sizing, it would be of no use to it.
Why is the soils, lot sizing by soils significant?
Well, it's to ensure that it can handle a well and septic, and it's obviously years ago they didn't have lot sizing by soils. It's a more accurate method of towns being able to make sure the lots meet the criteria.
See. And so when you say that the town of Derry sizing is .78, is that 0.78, is that that's a fraction less than the requirement? Or is that
well,
.78 more than the requirement?
It's 0.78 of the requirement, so the reverse of .78 would be its negative value.
I see.
But in this particular case, meeting the lot size requirement for that front parcel would be of no value. It's not, it would be adding soils across the wetland to it.
Okay,
It's a pretty unique situation.
all right. Well, let me pass this torch and see if anybody else has any questions. Anybody else on the board?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Corbett?
So with the attached letter and as well as in the drawings, kind of where Mr. Perkins is going, you referenced the poorly drained soils, the very poorly drained soils, and just discuss how it would affect the lot's usable area. Could you just elaborate?
I'm sorry?
You kind of mentioned how it'll affect the lot's usable area for this proposal. Could you just elaborate on that?
If this variance is granted, before we go to the planning board, we would have to get a dredge and fill permit to cross that little piece of wetland. That is a poorly drained soil. The very poorly drained soil is actually water, which is in the bigger part of the wetland shown on the plan. Lesser value hydric A and hydric B soil. It's hydric B, which is poorly drained rather than very poorly drained. Bruce Gilday is a soil scientist we use on the property, and his mapping has always been quite accurate.
Would any of the construction would any of the construction kind of negate the poorly drained soils, the very poorly drained soils, or is this just to elaborate the difficulty of what you're working with?
I'm sorry, I didn't
Would any
hear.
of the construction that you're proposing do anything to, remediate the poorly drained soils, the very poorly drained soil, or is that just to elaborate the difficulty of the property that you're working with?
It would be a minimal crossing for a 12-foot driveway and slopes, culverted. It would have to be approved, obviously, by the state prior to that. And Mr. Goulet would be presenting the dredge and fill information to DES.
Thank you.
Mr. Burgess, anything from you?
Nothing right now.
Okay, down to my left, Ms. Moran?
I don't have anything,
Mr. Tripp?
So what you're saying is that for this lot to be usable, you're going to have to get a dredge and fill permit.
I'm sorry?
Am I on? All right. So what you're saying is for this lot to be usable for residents, you're going to have to get a dredge and fill permit to cross wetland.
That is correct.
Right. And this is about 420 square foot?
That's a very good estimate.
Well, that's what's on the map.
Yeah,
All right, so
okay.
The rest of the land in this particular lot has good soil in it?
Yes.
And
Not entirely. There is a section of wetland to the rear of the rear parcel. You can see the building setbacks on the rear parcel. That area in the front that is somewhat hourglass shaped in the middle, would be the buildable area for a new home back there.
okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Donlin?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Beetzel? Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Obimba?
All set.
Okay. Does that pretty much conclude your opening presentation?
Yes, it does,
Okay.
unless you have any other questions.
Not at this time. Of course, we're going to make a call to public, and before we do that, we'll ask for Mr. Mackey's input, if he has anything that he feels the board might be shy of here.
Of course, we're talking a low, medium-density residential zoning district, which has a 2-acre minimum along with a 150-foot frontage requirement. Obviously, the applicants are looking for relief here from the area requirement. They've made that kind of unique triangle down so that they can get the frontage that's required in the district. So technically, that's been met, but the area is the issue here. Certainly, they've made the argument there is wetland that basically wraps around the existing home, so kind of a natural barrier around that. Again, as Mr. Lavelle stated, I guess per the town's soil regulations, when he says .78, basically that would probably mean it's 3/4 or so the size of what it would typically be required under our soils mapping. Again, that's the lot with the existing home. I'm assuming, were the septic to fail on that there'd be area there for a replacement system that would need to be state approved, and maybe Mr. Lavelle can speak to that. That would be the biggest concern, I guess. Beyond that, if this were to be approved by the zoning board, obviously it would need to go to TRC and the planning board.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mackey. When you were creating this extra lot, you were working specifically off of the overage of the frontage, correct? You had 300 feet of frontage where you only needed 150, correct?
That's exactly, that was on the record. However, we did survey the property, and the monuments They are at 300 feet apart.
I see, okay. All right, very good. Well, of course, we'll call the public at this point, and you'll have an opportunity to rebut anything that may come up, and if anyone cares to speak to this. So at this point, we'll make a call to the public, and anybody that would like to speak in favor of this application, this is your opportunity to do so, to support it. We also have some phone numbers up there for anyone who is remote that would like to call in. Those phone numbers are 646-558-8656. At the prompting, please enter your ID number, the meeting ID number, and if you're having any technical problems, we can get you in. Oh, I've lost that number.
Technical issues, please dial 603-845-5585. Somebody will be glad to help you.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Corbett. And just press star 9, and the technician will recognize you and get you into the meeting. So that call to public has been made for support. I see no one rise here. And do you have anybody out there, Mr. Preventure? Seeing none rise online, Mr. Chair. Very good, so we'll assume that we've met our criteria for support of the application. So now the same requirements apply for anyone who wishes to oppose this application. This would be your opportunity to come forward and be heard. And likewise, anybody that is remote and would like to call in, you follow the same instructions for the opposition. So I see no one rise, and I do. Okay, Mr. Lavelle, could I get you to step back, and we'll have let this gentleman come forward. And good evening, sir. Good evening. Would you like to identify yourself?
Jerry Daigle. I live on 2 Olson Road. My neighbor on the corner of Olson and Hampstead.
Very good.
He had to go to New York. His mother fell, so he asked me to speak for him.
Okay. Proceed.
Okay. Of course, there is wetland there, and it approaches his property. It doesn't touch mine.
And-
Okay, the land comes up.
And your neighbor being who again?
What's it, Buchanan, I think? Right on the corner of Hampstead.
Got it, yep,
Hampstead and Olson,
okay.
okay? And the wetland is close to him or on his property also.
Okay. All right,
Okay?
and so is there a concern,
Yes, there is.
okay, which is what?
The land goes up after the wetland, about 30, 40 feet, levels off, goes back down. In that down section, it's a watershed, goes right through my property. My well is right in the middle, 22 feet deep. It crosses Olson Road. It goes across the front of 3 and 1 Olson. Then it crosses Hampstead Road, and it goes. Okay, I'm concerned that the lot's a little bit too small for the watershed in the back for my well. Water is there, right now, there's plenty of water, but it's always muddy. And in the spring, in the fall, I got water that crosses my whole property and crosses Olson Road.
Okay. So you are speaking on both the concerns of yourself and...
And my neighbor,
And Mr. Buchanan?
yes.
Okay. Anybody have any follow-up questions for Mr. Daigle? Ms. Tripp?
So you're concerned that by allowing this lot to be subdivided and a house built, it will somehow modify the water flow to your lots?
I would say yes, okay, because the plans don't show the existing properties around it. And he's gonna have to put a driveway in. The driveway, I don't know what the setback is to the property line, but between Mr. Buchanan and myself, we own that whole back piece, that property line, okay?
Mr. Mackey, do we have a specific space requirement off of a boundary for a driveway?
For a residential driveway, no.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So that means it might be right on the property line.
Typically, we advise people to keep them back enough for like snow plowing operations, that sort of thing, so you're not pushing snow onto your neighbor. But again, unlike commercial specifications, we don't have a residential setback, so.
Well, and I won't take Mr. Lavelle's thunder away on this, but he'll have an opportunity to speak to it. I can see on the map that there's some space there, but I don't know what it is specifically. I'm not sure how the location of this parcel and the dry area will affect water in regards to your own parcel. I would think that the dredge and fill, and again, I'm not going to lead, my intention is not to lead Mr. Lavelle, but I would expect that the dredge and fill allows equity flow and not disruption to any water that's on the site, but we'll get verification of that as well.
Well, I understand the dredge and fill is going to be in the front part of the property.
Yeah.
I'm talking the back side of the property. Okay, if you look on the map, you can see where it swales down,
Yep,
okay? That's right about 50 feet, maybe 70 feet from the back side of my property to the corner.
okay.
And that's where the watershed runs right through my property and crosses all the roads.
Well, I can say that on septic design, there's certain specific parameters for separation of open water, open
I understand
drains.
that.
Okay, so if you understand that, where do you actually stand on this? Are you totally opposed regardless of those requirements, or are you satisfied?
I believe my main concern is that driveway. It's going to open up the property line.
Okay,
There's no buffer zone left.
no
All the
buffer.
stone, all the wall, stone wall right there,
Okay,
all right?
yep. Does that stone wall continue along the property line?
Absolutely,
Yeah, all the way up to?
all the way,
instead-
corner to corner.
Okay,
And it hooks back around, and it heads towards the church.
okay. All righty. Anybody else have anything further for Mr. Daigle?
Yeah,
Mr. Burgess?
are you, do you know where they're going to be building in the 2-acre spot in the middle up top here?
Excuse me?
You know where they're going to be building the house exactly?
Yes.
Okay, so would that piece interfere with what you're talking about?
This is the property line right here.
Yeah, but right inside there,
Where the water runs through right here.
yeah, right above it is where they're gonna be putting it. They have that marking of 2 acres.
Right up here.
Yeah, right in that,
Almost abuts my property.
is that, am I correct? That is where you're building, right?
Yes. See, there's no buffer zone right here.
Okay,
Yeah. So it's right in the middle there.
you want to read them? So, Mr. Daigle, could I get you to go back to your seat so we can hear what you're saying? Thank you, Mr. Lavelle. Mr. Lavelle, just keep in mind, we'll let you rebut it and have any clarities, okay? No. So I think we understand the location of the proposed structure, the approximate location. I think we've made clear that the dredge and fill is not to obstruct water flow or and block it. And we'll have to wait and see what Mr. Lavelle rebuts with. Right?
Okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Hold on, Mr. Lavelle. You have anybody else out there, Mr. Preventure? Seeing none, rise. All right, thank you for bringing the mic to my attention. Anybody else in the room have anything to say on this matter? All right, seeing none, Mr. Lavelle, come on back up.
Thank you. You didn't really steal my thunder, but basically, you're quite correct. The dredge and fill will have to ensure that the flow from the neighboring property will continue as it does now. There would be no interruption of that wetland or no detriment to it. The driveway will be as far away from that property line as it can be. There'll be fill for the driveway, and there'll have to be some side slope, but it'll be all planned with the dredge and fill permit. And the aim is to not interrupt the flow of the current poorly drained soil.
Is the width of that, where the driveway is that total width approximately 75 feet?
No, it's less than that.
I see. Maybe 50?
Closer to 50, yes.
And Mr. Mackey, again, remind me the width of a road requirement in town?
Well, if we're talking about a driveway, and certainly I think in this case, the driveway would be over 150 feet to get to that backland where they would
14,
possibly
plus two,
build a
plus-
house. So typically for that requirement, it's going to be a 14-foot minimum traveled surface with 2-foot clear shoulders. And they would have to accommodate some turnaround at the end that would be acceptable to the fire department for.
And I know this isn't a road, and this is not going to be a road, but is a road requirement usually 25 feet?
Road requirements typically a 50-foot right-of-way with 24 feet of pavement.
Got it, okay. Thank you.
Your normal driveway is usually 12 feet wide, and when it is further away, as your building inspector says, it needs to be 14. So,
Yes. Yeah, and we recognize that with the 2 feet of buffer on each side, but if that's 50 feet, and I can see as I segregate the frontage that you have, that's probably about right, which leaves you a few feet on each side.
16 on each.
16 on each, thank you. I want to review again one more time where you think you're going to be putting where the proposed building location is. You have the designation on the map that says map 10 lot 5-1, but that's not where you're proposing to put the building, am I correct?
that's correct.
And it is for the line that secludes those designations?
Yes, again, if you look at that butterfly-shaped building area there, probably where it gets the widest from front to back, probably more towards the easterly property line of that rear lot,
Which way do you
that side of center.
Have you done a perk test yet?
We have not.
I see, okay. And probably because of limited access?
That's one reason. Actually, a small machine could make that crossing without disturbing too much. But we certainly go forward with that. If this variance is approved, all of that would have to be done, of course.
And when you designated this as upland, there are trees or some forest area
Yes,
out there?
I'd like to ask the question if anyone from the board actually walked the property.
Well, we don't walk the property.
don't, okay.
As part of our guidelines, we do drive by it and look at it, but as a rule, we don't do walk-ons of the parcels. So.
Pretty difficult to see that one with a drive-by, but yes. I know I've walked a number of properties with the planning board, and I didn't know whether you guys did, but I think if anybody had the opportunity, it really looks nice, quite buildable out there.
But it is somewhat forested?
It is forested.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you done your approximates of the clearances from open water and those requirements from DES?
Yes, I mean, that's what the,
So
That's
I guess my point is you have plenty of area to look at too.
oh, absolutely.
One of the things that strikes me is how the lot is configured, the new lot is being proposed, the angle of which is that you're creating the 150 feet of frontage. I realize you have 300 feet there. But how did you create the angle of the boundary that is going to separate the two parcels further up near the road?
Part of it was due to the fact that we needed 2 acres in the rear. So some of that land out, the frontage counts as the 2 acres.
Yep.
Seeking a further variance might have been one way to go, limiting the frontage to basically make that straight to the road. But
Right.
we didn't think adding variances to our request would be the right way to go.
Well, I think one of the things that's peculiar is the shape of the lot lines and how you created it.
Yes.
And because you're trying to make this up to achieve that frontage requirement,
That's correct.
but you're barely making that frontage requirement, and then you're reshaping the lot. It's an unnatural shape, and that's why I'm curious about it.
Yeah, the lot is 300 feet, and that's what we have to deal with.
Got it. Okay. I yield. Anybody else on the board have any questions? Follow up to Mr. Lavelle, Mr. Tripp.
On the second sheet, you've got, there's some blue lines here,
Okay?
and I take it that the blue lines there indicate that that is the wetland? Oh, you have a,
With the contours.
Ups and downs.
well, I believe it's wetland because that's where you're going to be having the,
Elevations, isn't it?
Mind if I look at your plan?
well, actually,
Oh, there's the-
Mr. Mackey was going to show you his.
Oh, yeah, that's the wetland.
Okay. So it appears that there's a major portion of the front lot is wetland, and I don't think that's usable for septics, right? Is there some sort of regulation that there has to be?
There are regulations with regard to setbacks and so forth. And I think that gets back to what was originally presented, is that by soils, it's under what would normally be required, because that's what you're looking at typically.
So under means it's less
Less than-
available soil to be,
Correct.
put a septic in. There's only like 3/4 of what is required
By soils, yes.
by soils. All right, thank you.
0.78.
Anything else, Mr. Tripp?
Now,
All right, very good. Good questions. Mr. Burgess, you all set?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, very good. All right, well, I believe I'm all set. Mr. Corby, you all set?
Yeah, you asked a lot of questions that I had, Mr. Chair.
Anything else, Mr. Lavelle?
No, thank you.
All right, well, I think I've asked my questions. I do have a concern about how that front is structured, but I've asked those questions. So if no one has anything else, we can take a motion and go into deliberation.
Chair, I'll make the motion.
Mr.
I'll second the
Corbett
motion.
makes the motion.
I'll
Mr.
second the motion.
Burgess has a second. All in favor of going into deliberation, say aye.
I,
Any opposed? Hearing none, we're into deliberations. Anybody care to speak on this matter?
It's definitely a very interesting property shape. I can appreciate that in regards to the question of how they got to the size of the 1.27 and the 2. The way that I kind of looked at the design here is when you see this poorly drained soil, the very poorly drained, and the way it was specifically called out is really to show, what can be used anyways, almost to make the point that even of what's here of that, 3.5 acres, you really have, I don't know, maybe an acre that's usable land. So I thought it was a good way to set it up. I have concerns over the driveway going over the wetlands. I'd be curious to see what would come out of that with the further reviews, but I don't know, it's interesting. I don't think it's completely overbearing, but it's definitely a strange setup due to the cut of the land.
Mr. Tripp, any thoughts?
Well, I believe that when you have a subdivision, that you have to have 2 buildable lots or whatever. And I think what's occurred here is, as Mr. Lavelle pointed out, that you've only got 0.78 of the required soils for the front lot now, which to me is an issue. I don't know if it's an issue that we should be digging into, but
Yeah, so the area that's creates the 2-acre requirement in square footage,
yes,
but it doesn't create the area of 2 acres in regards to usable building area.
yeah.
And I can't, those requirements and those permits go beyond this board's reach.
Well, that's kind of what I was asking, so I'll just quit asking questions about that then.
No, it's, the question and the way you phrased it and the answer that came back from it offered some clarity that I thought was fair, because I was a little confused on that myself. But what this does is though it creates a second lot that does conform and gives the 2-acre requirement, it creates another lot that doesn't meet that requirement. So we're swapping. We're asking permission for the creation of of a lot that meets the requirements, but we're getting rid of a lot that doesn't meet the requirements. And that aside, at times we've seen some relief created where that happens, but it doesn't happen. You don't get rid of one to create a different one. And I think one of the things that strikes me is the way the frontage is created. For instance, on some of the areas, districts, we have not only the frontage requirement, but the width requirement at setback, and this zone obviously does not have that. Am I correct, Mr. Mackey?
Well, we do have the building width, but typically that can be measured at the 35-foot setback or at the front lot line, it says. So.
Got it, okay, thank you. But this is the creation of this is creating 150 feet to meet that frontage requirement. But it's carving it in a way that if it were 300 feet of width all the way back, front to back, this was a perfect rectangular lot, would there be no argument and there'd be no need to be here, other than perhaps setback requirements to wet areas. That's hypothetical. So that's what my mind is starting to look at, and what it's focused on is how this frontage requirement was created and what the disposable area or the old area will look like. So, Mr. Burgess?
Yeah, I'm feeling the same way. It's the way it's been chopped up, I guess is as good a word as any, to conform with 150 feet. The driveway going over the wetlands doesn't float my boat much. In order to get the 2 acres, they're jury-rigging this thing, or, gerrymandering almost, taking it apart and starting it all over again. And then we're going to reduce what was actually a viable piece of land down to 1.27 acres, so.
Well, to that point, that's kind of where I'm wrestling in the other way to take it from a really viable piece of land just to the 1.27. You know, to me, especially the way it's broken up when you look at it, from where the existing house is going back, you can almost make the argument that the remainder of the property isn't usable. I mean, to get to the one area of land that's just surrounded by wetlands, that's, you know, how far away is that? I'm just gonna throw out, I'm not gonna throw out size, we tell the difference, it's pretty far back on the property. You know, it feels like they're already confined
Well, we're over.
just to that area at the existing house, whereas this does at least create usable space. So that, I hear everything else as well, that's where I'm currently struggling between the two, is I do see it as an opportunity to create usable space where otherwise I think you're kind of stuck.
Well, it's more than 150 feet back, as they were
Yeah,
saying.
noting that line parallel the driveway is 160 feet, and there's still distance off of that at the apex heading towards the road that's at least making that 200 feet back. Not that we don't have 200-foot driveways in town, and we've had cases where we've made approvals with that kind of driveway to it. But the way this is carved back, I keep going back to that. So, Mr. Burgess, I don't know if I cut you off or not.
No, I'm good.
All right, Mrs. Moore, anything?
I agree with what they just said, but I view it the opposite. I look at it as, right now, it's, you know, just a property within all the setbacks, but when they go to change it, they're creating their own hardship. As it is, it's, you know, within all the zoning, but I don't understand. I guess I have to look at it more. Like, I just don't understand all the, I don't know, the wetlands that are there to get to something. There's just a whole lot.
Yeah, it's, Mr. Burgess touched on the gerrymandering or jerry-rigging, you know, to achieve what the requirements are, but, and again, for me, it goes back to what are you leaving it with? You know? Anybody else have any other thoughts? We all clear on that?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Tripp, you all set?
Well, I agree with Mr. Corbett that the existing property is kind of, it's the only place on the lot that's viable because it's surrounded by the front end wetlands. I do believe that you could probably change make the access to the rear a little wider, but by just rearranging where the front lot lines are. But I don't believe that would do anything productive. You know?
Yeah.
As for the rear wetlands, I don't believe that anything that is going on here would probably affect that, because this is one of those things that, you know, that you're going to be 150 feet back already, and why would anybody make a longer driveway so that you could interfere with the wetlands in the back? It is an interesting drawing.
Okay, well, let's structure the motion. We have our usual town and state permits and inspections. And of course, we structure an affirmative, but, and then as Mr. Mackey has presented, this would be required if it were approved to have planning board subdivision approval. Are there any other conditions someone would seek to have on this motion prior to voting on it? Mr. Burgess, you all set?
Yeah, I'm good.
Mr. Tripp?
I'm all set.
Okay, Mr. Corbett, you
Yeah,
as well?
I think that covers everything.
Okay, very good. Mrs. Moran as well?
I am, thank you.
All right, very good.
I'll make the motion to come out with deliberate possession.
All right, motion made by Mr. Burgess. Come out of deliberation.
I'll second it.
Mr. Corbett has a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. So, Mrs. Moore, you have a motion to read.
I do, thank you. I make a motion on case number 23-117, James M. LaValle, LLS, owner James J. Yaretz III, revocable trust James J. Yaretz III, trustee, to grant a variance to the terms of Article 6, Section 165-47.b.1 of the Town of Derry zoning ordinance to allow the property to be subdivided into 2 lots, with one of the lots containing 1.27 acres, where 2 acres is required at 179 Hampstead Road, parcel ID 10005, zoned LMDR, as presented with the following conditions. We have 2. The first is subject to obtaining all state and town permits and inspections, and the second is subject to planning board subdivision approval. And that concludes the reading of the motion. I need a second, please.
I'll second it.
Mr. Burgess has a second on the motion. That motion's on the floor. And let us add in the finding of fact. Mr. Corbett?
Mr. Chair, the board found that the applicant's requesting a variance to Article 6, Section 165-47.b.1. The property is in the LMDR zone. Both lots will provide the required 150 feet of frontage. The proposed lot meets the 2-acre requirement. However, the existing dwelling will require a variance as it only has 1.27 acres. The property is bisected by wetlands around its existing home. Does anybody have anything to add at the moment?
That the property would need a dredge and fill permit. Anybody have any disputes with the finding of fact?
Nope.
Very good.
And then please note the board also includes all facts found in the meeting minutes for this application and incorporates all meeting minutes into its finding of facts and decisions.
All right, very good. So all in favor of moving that motion for a vote forward, say aye.
Aye.
In support of the finding of fact. Any disputes with that? I heard none. So let's poll the board. Mr. Tripp?
I find that the application meets all the variance criteria.
Very good. That's a yes.
That's a yes.
Very good. Mr. Corbett?
Mr. Chair, I also vote yes on this.
Very good. Mr. Burgess?
I'm going to vote no. I think it's contrary to the public interest.
Very good. Mrs. Moran?
Chair, I'm also going to vote no because I feel that the same as what Mr. Burgess had said, that it is not contrary to the public interest,
All right.
It's contrary.
or is contrary, sorry.
And how do you feel on the on hardship?
I feel that as it is, it's a just fine lot, and that it would be a self-created hardship.
Very good. All right. The chair is going to vote no as well. I feel that the configuration of the lot and the disputes with the wet area don't meet the hardship that's stated on this. I feel that it's I feel that the lot that's there is usable for itself, that denying this is not unreasonable to the applicant. So I dispute the hardship anyway. I feel that the design of that second lot is not a natural design, and it's being created just to achieve square footage without recognizing the impact on the existing lot. So I vote no based on hardship. And that makes that a vote of 3 to 2 in denial. Mr. Lavelle, anybody aggrieved by this has 30 days, of course, to ask this board for reconsideration, rehearing. And after that, recourse would be to Superior Court.
Oh, the ADU.
Very good, thank you.
This shouldn't be big.
All right, next case up is Joshua and Shannon Shed. That's case number 23-118. Yeah, you're gonna sit out. Oh, okay, good enough, all right, good enough.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Shed?
Yes, sir.
Yep, okay, very good, and you're here for your shed.
I
Like the
am.
low-hanging fruit out
Kind of
there.
like an
Trying
offspring,
to keep it
isn't
in the
it?
family.
All right, so I'm sure you're a trained professional at this. We just ask you to read your application.
I did not bring my application,
Okay.
but it looks like Mr. Mackey might be able to accommodate it.
Oh, he said he would sit. That's all right. So we just have you read for the record what you've already stated.
Okay.
You'll have a chance to elaborate on that in case you've had second thoughts or decide you want to improve on it.
Excellent.
And then you saw how we handled the last case. We'll hit you with some questions and,
Sounds great.
very good. You have the floor. Welcome.
Thank you. So you're asking for the, essentially the bottom due to the unusual shape of the lot?
Each of the
This
five
part
one.
here.
Okay, each of the five?
Yes, please.
Excellent. So the variance will not be contrary to public interest because most properties on the street have sheds. I assume it would increase the overall value. The spirit of the ordinance is observed because a shed would provide a place to store outdoor items without creating any eyesores. Substantial justice is done because there is no other spot on the property to build a shed where it will be structurally sound. The values surrounding the property are not diminished because the construction of a shed will be in line with the other properties on the street. A shed is a great selling point. And due to the unusual shape and slopes of the property, the shed will only, the shed will only exceed the ordinance by a few feet. Its location will not hinder nor impede the use of the surrounding land as it stands. It will be behind our privacy trees with adequate room to maintain the land without trespassing onto any other properties.
You had just a quick sentence on the second page. Bobby, you got that one?
My apologies. And the reason for this is to store tools, lawnmowers, snow blowers, etc. Basic use of a shed.
Very good. Thank you. So why don't you share with us what you're doing? You have a shed there currently, correct?
So, yes, I started putting a shed up, not knowing that I needed a building permit for it. And Mr. Mackey informed me that I should go through the proper channels, which is why I've applied for a variance for this. Due to the nature of the land that I currently own, it's a very large slope. I'm not sure if you guys have driven by to see that, but there's not really a feasible place to put a shed that I could move it back further from the street frontage.
It's rather ledgy over there, isn't it?
Yeah. It's,
Like my house.
kids used to love to go slide down the hill in the back. There's a path that comes down. It's, yeah, it's got quite a hill.
Okay. Does anybody need to see the photos of the site? Okay, very good.
I got the missed.
Just pass those around. Bear with us, Mr. Shed. I say that, I don't know whether I'm talking to a person or a structure, right?
You know? I was starting to take it personal. I'm like, geez.
A lot of jokes could be like off of that, right? And I saw the man out there, he's talking to his shed.
You know?
All right. Anybody have any follow-up, or do you want to wait for, see the photos? Mr. Dietzel?
Are you, I've got a question. Are you putting a basement in the shed?
Absolutely not. It is on skids.
It's going to be a what?
It is on skids.
Skid?
Yep, so it's just a couple 4x4 pressure-treated beams that are underneath the shed, so you could very easily get a fork truck under and move it if you had to.
So the question I would have is, how does the rock or ledge in your yard impact the positioning of the shed?
So my entire property, when you walk into my front door, you go up a flight of steps. When you walk out the back door, you're back on level ground. So my property is very much slanted like this, and then at the bottom, it straightens out as it's coming out to the road. So if I was to put it any further back, I would have to dig into and essentially have it submerge the back end into the ground.
Essentially, your total area to really put this shed is pretty limited on the lot.
It is, and looking at the different codes in town, I figured it would be much more appealing to have a shed than to bring in a storage container. I just think that would be an eyesore, and I'd rather have something that's pleasant to look at in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Tripp, go ahead.
So the only flat spot on your property is in the front yard?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Actually,
I believe Mr. Mackey could attest to that.
Mr. Mackey?
Yes. No. Yeah, as Mr. Shed had said, I happened to be in the neighborhood and saw that the shed was under construction, and that it looked like it certainly wasn't in compliance with the front setback, so said, well, your options are to try to move it, which, again, if anybody took a ride up there or is familiar with Blackberry, so you have the houses as you go down Blackberry. The ones on the right have somewhat of a level front yard, but then the backyards all go like that. And then the ones across the street have a somewhat, well, not even a somewhat level background, but they drop off. So it is limited usable area on the property. It is fairly close to the cul-de-sac, but there is a screen, if you look at the pictures of arborvitae's there, so it kind of hides it there. And I wouldn't anticipate it would interfere with any road maintenance or anything like that. So.
Got to turn around. Down the end.
And obviously, were this to be approved, they would need to apply for a building permit. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Obimba, you have any questions? Mr. Donlin?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mrs. Moran?
No.
Mr. Burgess and Mr. Corby, both all
I was
set?
up there today, I can see why he put it there.
All right.
Yeah.
But even
I-
that, even where he's putting it isn't level.
Yeah, I'd say,
He had to put
I did
skims
have to dig in the
underneath,
back a
yeah.
little bit for where I started. My apologies for starting ahead of time.
Not-
I'm a computer guy, not a construction guy.
and kind of Mr. Burgess' point when I passed by, I mean, I appreciated trying to hide it behind the trees, and it really didn't look like there was anywhere else to put something, front yard, backyard, so, yeah.
Yeah, if you're gonna put it anywhere, it's there, because it's right behind the trees.
Mr. Tripp?
This looks like it's a condex.
It's a shared property. It's, I do own my side, the other neighbor owns their side.
As opposed to they don't rent.
I know, but I don't, like I said, it's a condex, which means that the property is owned jointly by you and your neighbor.
That is correct.
So he doesn't mind you putting a shed up?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay, that's the question I was asking.
I gotcha,
You know,
my
since-
apologies.
Since you are in a unique situation, you know, he has first right of
Correct.
denial.
Correct, and he was invited. We've made sure that everybody was aware. I mean, everybody's seen what it's going to look like at this point because
Okay, thank you.
I started.
It's hidden behind the bushes.
It'll be a grand,
did try to
Can't
hide
see
it.
it.
it'll be a grand reveal upon the permitting.
And honestly, I just figured it's much more appealing than a 40-foot rusty old shipping container, which, I mean, I'd get a whole lot more storage out of that, but that's an eyesore.
I think that's considered. All set with those photos down there? All right, well, now we'll find out if the neighbor has anything to complain about, because now we go to ask the neighbor portion of the meeting. Anybody, Mr. Mackey, you've given us your full input, no other surprises, no rabbits in the hat, so to speak, and so anybody that wishes to speak on this matter favorably first, this is your opportunity to come forward. Mr. Provencher, we have some phone numbers there.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the folks at home can see those.
Perfect. Mr. Corbett, you want to read those?
Yep, in case you can't see it, the numbers to dial are 646-558-8656, and your meeting ID is 323-909-140. Press star 9 to raise your hand once you're in, and if you're having any technical issues, please dial 603-845-5585.
All right, very good, thank you. So no one has risen here in the room to speak favorably, and you see nobody out there, Mr. Provencher?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
All right, very good. Anybody opposed to this application, this is your opportunity to come forward. This is where the neighbor pops out of us, but he's in the screen, that's correct. So no one here, also, Mr. Venture? All right, very good. We're going to pay, small, that's a big motion. The court says, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Who wants to leave off?
This shed is awfully close to the property line. Again, close to there. With, as stated previously, I agree, we should hide it behind the privacy trees. It's not completely out at you, which I feel is actually therefore. So, me, it did need a variance this year, for this other. I don't have much an issue with it. I can just go about.
Good. Anybody else? Mrs. Moran?
I think it's completely reasonable. He's not asking for 24 by 24 feet. It's 8 by 12.
All right, very good. Structure of the motion, subject to town and state permits and inspections, to which Mr. Shedd will have to go and see code enforcement and would have to get a permit and follow those guidelines and channels. But other than that, I see nothing else to put on as a condition. Is there anybody else would like to speak to that?
Mr. Chair.
All right, so we're good, we're cruising along, so all in favor of coming out of deliberation, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Mrs. Moran, you have a motion to read.
I do, thank you. I make a motion on case number 23-118, Joshua and Shannon Shedd, to grant a variance to the terms of Article 6, Section 165-46.c.4 of the Town of Derry zoning ordinance to allow the installation of an 8-foot by 12-foot shed to be located less than 35 feet from the front lot line at 11L Blackberry Road, parcel ID 22004-012L, zoned MDR, as presented with the following conditions. We had one, subject to obtaining all state and town permits and inspections, and that concludes the reading of the motion. I need a second.
I'll second it.
Very good. The motion's on the floor, and we have a finding of fact to place for the record. Mr. Corbett?
So, Mr. Chair, the board has found that the property is located in the MDR zone. The applicant is seeking relief to Article 6, Section 165-46.c.4. Construction had previously begun and was discovered by town staff when in the field. Due to the slopes on property, there are limited areas for the placement of the shed. BP will be required. Does anybody have any other facts to add to this? Then please note, the board also includes all facts found in the meeting minutes for the application and incorporates all meeting minutes into its facts and decisions.
Very good. All in favor of moving this for a vote and the finding of fact, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Mr. Tripp?
I vote yes.
Very good. Mrs. Moran?
Chair, I vote yes.
Mr. Burgess?
I'm going to vote yes.
And Mr. Corbett?
I'm a yes.
I'll make that unanimous, so congratulations, Mr. Shed. You have your instructions. Godspeed, carry on, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you all.
Oh, you have 30 days. Anybody aggrieved by this has 30 days to ask for a rehearing. Otherwise, recourse after that would be Superior Court. So before you build the shed, wait 30 days.
Before you get your permit, yeah.
It's not
Already done that.
All right, thank you very much. Have a good
Excellent.
evening.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
All right, next case up is Promised Land Survey LLC, representing James and Lisa Whiteneck, case number 23-119. I'll step down for an alternate. Mr. Corbett, I hand the gavel to you.
That's right. Mr. Obimba, would you like to sit on this case?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right. Oh, welcome, Mr. Peliquin.
Good evening.
I know it's one of your first meetings with us. You're definitely not familiar with the protocol. That's what we'd like to hear after you introduce yourself.
Absolutely.
To go through the 5 criteria,
Thank you.
and we'll let you open up, and we'll bombard you with questions.
Sure. Good evening. Again, I'm Tim Peliquin from Promised Land Survey, my company, representing James and Lisa Whiteneck, owners of the property, which is known as Springlook Farm. And so the proposal is to request, I'm just going to read what the proposal says, and I'm going to go through the 5 points. Request to construct an ADU, known as an accessory dwelling unit, of 800 square feet living area, 1 floor, 26 by 32, that is not attached to the primary structure. The retail structure being a retail shop and 2,000 square foot living area above on a 22-acre parcel within the LDR district. The variance will not be contrary to the public interest because the land area, 22 acres, is large in this district and has 460 plus feet of frontage and is situated several hundred feet off the roadway, known as Island Pond Road. The spirit of the ordinance is observed because the landowners of record will be able to care for their aging parents without the need for major remodeling of their business and current structure. Substantial justice is done because there is significant need for housing, particularly for the aging, and this will provide more sustainable living for their parents of the Whiteneck owners, family, and beyond. The values of surrounding properties are not diminished because the location of the ADU is placed well off the roadway, several hundred feet, and will not be viewed or noticeable from the roadway or likely any current abutters. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship for purposes of blah, 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 unnecessary hardship. By not granting this variance, and with the landowner's quest and desire to care for their aging parents, the Whiteneck family and/or its successors may have to alter their retail business in its current location, which is greatly successful currently, or consider developing their property with a new roadway to allow this new dwelling, ADU, and consider their ROI, meaning return on investment. This proposal would limit or omit those possibilities. The proposed use is a reasonable one because the request is unique in that the property is large in area and frontage and is set back several, I said several feet, but really several hundred feet of off roadway, thus likely not causing any major concerns, and for all the reasons stated previously on criteria B. So that's the proposal, Mr. Vice Chairman. And as part of our plan, as part of our proposal, we provided a plan that should be in your packet. It's actually a full-size plan because we surveyed this years ago when the Chicarians owned the property, and as well as when the Whitenecks purchased this property and renamed it Springlook Farm. They have a very successful nursery business and a landscape business that runs out of there. They do have an existing apartment above their retail space that Jim and Lisa Whiteneck live. Lisa's parents currently live with her. or live on the property most of the year, and are literally living in a mobile home outside their dwelling. There's no ample area to put an ADU, because the question will be obvious, why don't you just attach an 800 square foot? But there's a retail area on the first floor, and there's greenhouses, there's landscape galore where they're selling, and on the other side is an existing garage, another thing that the maintenance workers use. And that was all part of an original site plan approval that we did receive for the White Necks a number of years ago before they operated. So there's very limited area to attach an ADU to the existing dwelling. So for that reason, they've selected the most ample spot, and we're showing where that is. It's well shielded away from their current business. It's just a small, we'll call it a tiny home for all intents and purposes, and for their parents and of course that could be used in the future. But one positive thing from maybe this planning board, zoning board standpoint is from a planning standpoint, this will limit. This property could be developed one day, right? But this limits any possibilities for development of this parcel. Their full intent is to continue to run their nursery business successfully, landscape business at the property, and just have a small ADU for, again, their aging parents. So that's the proposal before you, and we'll respectfully try to answer any questions this board would have or comment on any public comment that may come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peliquin. I think much like every other resident in town, very familiar with the property, both when the Chikirians owned it and since the White Necks have taken it over. Question about the location. This is going to be, looks like a couple hundred feet, almost even behind where the fruit trees are currently for sale. Is that
Yes,
accurate? So it's pretty,
indeed.
it is pretty far back there, and I know it's a tough site. And just to kind of speak to the board, I feel like I'm having my Lynn and Alan Ver moment, but this case, when the White Necks bought the property, was the first case that I was ever a part of the zoning board for. And one of the items that always stuck out for me is I remember one of the abutters on Stone Fence Drive really had concerns. The variance was to go from primarily a nursery to a landscaping, or primarily a nursery with a landscaping company to reverse it.
Yes, I recall the same because I represented.
Yeah, and the abutter was very concerned that doing that was going to really kind of lower the quality of life between the noise, the dumpage, and everything. So I appreciate the house. It's all kind of a long way of saying I appreciate the house on the other side of the property. Keeping that in mind years later. At this time, I don't have many questions. I do agree. There's not much to work with the existing building. It would be blocking that garage. With the property that's there. So I'll open up to the rest of the board if you guys have any questions at this time. Mr. Burgess.
Yeah, how far up the building is this?
How far off the current building?
Yeah.
About 400 feet.
Oh, that is really detached.
Indeed it is. But it is a large property. There's no wetlands within there. There's a big parking area for retail. There's this is full of bushes and plants for sale throughout this property. So it literally takes it off the beaten path.
Now, there are two different maps I have here. I have this one here with the dotted line. It says new property line.
That's when they got the easement, the Chikirians, when they subdivided the easement for this access road.
Okay, I didn't see that.
Yeah, that's one of the documents located
Okay.
further. Sorry, the question was just what the second document was, which you had referenced from the Chikirian.
I provided, thank you. I provided the original property when we subdivided. Is that correct for the Chikirian?
Yeah, well, it says new property line going through.
Yes. And
Right,
when the
the little box in the
Chikirians, that's correct.
Yeah, okay.
I provided that as the original platted
Okay.
property. That references the deed, just for clarity for
So
everyone.
This is the new one. Yeah. I got that part. So there's no way you could put this any closer to that existing building?
You could, but it will start to, this is the convenient location. By moving it closer, you're putting it more in the middle of their, or within the confines of their current nursery business.
Okay. All right, I guess that's what I got for the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Go all, kick a little bit to the right. Mr. Dietzel, do you have anything at the moment? All right, we'll go all the way down the left. Mr. Rabimba?
None at this point, but I had something for code enforcement. Since this is too far off from the building, which, and defines what an accessory dwelling unit will be, wouldn't that count as a secondary, residence on the property? So you have a two residence property instead of a dwelling unit. Will that?
So the question, if it's be two dwelling units?
Yeah.
Ultimately, yes, because again, as was stated, up over the retail is an apartment that the property owners do live in. But again, because it will fit, other than being attached, it will fit the requirements of an accessory dwelling unit. So
Only 800.
it's kind of semantics, but basically what they've applied for is to allow to construct a detached accessory dwelling unit. So part of the requirements for, certainly the town allows for accessory dwelling units. We have a number of requirements in the zoning ordinance. The big ones being maximum of 800 square feet of living space, no more than 2 bedrooms, and must be attached to the main structure or within the main structure. And obviously, they're looking for relief for that, from that particular requirement. Again, if it's approved, being so far away, I'm assuming there'd be a separate state-approved septic system that they would need to have, and I'm not sure about the well, whether it would have a separate well, that sort of thing, so. But
Thank you.
So
Just to
anyway.
answer that question, if I can jump in, Mr. Chair or Vice Chair, is that okay if I answer
Yes,
Ms.
Mr.
Macki's
Pelican.
question? I believe that we will share the well. That's the intention right now, because there's ample water supply. It may indeed have its own small septic system associated with it, rather than pumping to the existing septic system, which is ample, but it would need to be increased a little bit. So it probably makes sense to just have a small septic system on its own with this, I'm going to call it a tiny house.
Thank you. Was that suffice, Mr. Rabimba?
All set. Thank you.
Mr. Donlin?
Good question.
Yeah, I had the questions about the utilities, but that was just answered. And
This is almost like a shed request.
I mean, yeah, it's one story, 26 by 32 is small, but 800 square feet is a small, but one story and ample for what they're looking to have.
Yeah. I'd like
The folks are here, which are satisfied with this size, and they have a design in mind that will meet their needs.
well, that's the nice thing about tiny houses. They're easy to heat and they're easy to cool.
Right.
Because there's not that much space, so.
Exactly, true.
Yeah. So I really don't have
There's a lot
any
of solar exposure on this too. 'Cause
What?
there's a lot of solar exposure here because it's in the wide open.
Oh.
This is all fielded.
Mr. Donlin, did you find one? Were you good?
I do find it somewhat interesting that under your substantial justice, you said there's a significant need for housing, and then you made another point about this limiting the development of the land, which kind of runs contrary to each other.
Sure. And you're saying, why did I say that?
I was just making a point, I guess, more than
Yep.
anything.
Yep. And my only point in saying that, just for clarification, is, the landowners, like any property, right, and you have a large parcel like this, they'd have the opportunity to subdivide their land or do something different, whatever they had to do to if they chose to have their parents live with them, but it might require a roadway and then a few lots and then a subdivision as a sort to have your return on investment for the roadway construction and other things like that. So that is a viable option that I would extend to them if this wasn't granted, because one way or another, they want to care for their parents and have them live with them in an ample area. So that was the only point.
Thank you. Ms. Moran?
I have no questions at this time. My concern was septic.
Yes, so before we turn it over to the public, I'll kick it back to Mr. Mackey. Bob, do you have anything else to add?
And nothing other, I mean, it's a little unique in that you have this gravel drive, the main drive that goes into the business, and where they're looking to put this ADU is there's a side driveway that feeds the Chakarian home. Bill Chakarian still owns a house off to the right that you can see on that original platting. So it would be accessed off of that particular driveway, I would assume, so.
Mr. Mackey, the gravel driveway that goes by this unit, how wide does that have to be? Or does it? I mean, you're gonna,
Well, I think that was developed prior to the current regulations we're enforcing. I've been up there several times in the not-too-recent past. I'd say it's probably in the neighborhood of 12 to,
I would say more like 18 to
yeah, it's fairly
it's
wide, yeah.
18 to 20.
Good-sized driveway. I wouldn't disagree with that, yeah.
well, it's just, you know, looking if a fire truck or ambulance or something has to go up there, they have to have some turnaround spot. And that would be, you know, one of those things that I,
It may be something
Worry
that,
about.
you know, if they do get approval to build this, that they'll have to incorporate some type of turnaround at that particular residence.
okay.
All right, well, with that, I think the board's peppered you pretty good. So we will open it up to the public forum. We'll start off with those in favor. We'll start with people in attendance, but those at home who wish to dial in, your number is going to be 646-558-8656, and your meeting ID is 323-909-140. You'll press *9 to raise your hand. If you're having any technical issues, you'll dial 603-845-5585, and someone will help you. So at this time, I'll turn it over to anybody in attendance who'd like to come up and speak in favor of this applicant. You may step forward. Seeing none rise at this time, Mr. Renter. All right, so now at this time, we will turn it over to see if there is anybody in attendance opposed to this. Seeing no pitchforks, so we'll kick this over to the television. Looks like we have none there as well. So, Mr. Pelican, we will invite you up, and if you have anything you'd like to add or clarify for us, now would be your time.
I don't believe so. I know it's unusual request, but I will say it's an unusual piece of land. It's large, it's open, and I think it's a very viable request in my book. So that's all I'd have to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If the board has nothing else, I believe we can make a motion to go into deliberative.
I'll make the motion to go into deliberative.
We got a motion from Mr. Burgess. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We got a second from Ms. Moran. All in favor of going into deliberative, say aye.
Aye.
All right, all opposed? Hearing none. Gavel it, we are in deliberative.
Pretty.
So, and looking at this, I guess I'll see, does anybody have anything to get started before I just start babbling?
The only issue I have is, well, two issues actually, that it's a bit far for detached condo, ADU, I'm sorry. And, yeah, the driveway going, you know, the access to the property, that's my big problem.
That was one of the items that jumped out at me when we first came over and first saw the drawing, how far away it was.
Yeah.
To me, where I was able to kind of come to terms with it, one, the proposal kind of reminds me of like the old little tea houses that you'd see in like the early 1900 houses. If you had a large property, they have a little one for the kids to play in. It kind of gave me that feel, so it didn't seem too obtrusive. But My concern is being able to build off of the building and just what that does to an existing business in town. And just the hardship I think that would create. Now, granted, it's one that would be brought on by themselves, but to me, with the amount of space that there is and, the size of what's being asked for, I'm with you, it's far away, but I don't think it's not like they're building a giant house
No,
over there.
Oh, no, it's a
Yeah.
small, one-story building, which is good for an elderly person.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice little touch as well, but where
Okay.
that could go in the future, you never know.
Anybody else?
There's more, Mr. Tripp, Mr. Rabimba?
Well, I believe the reason they're here is because the current ordinances require that the ADUs be attached to the building. And as Mr. Peliquin said, it's hard to attach a ADU to a residence that's on the second floor. So I think this is a justifiable request for a variance to the ADU ordinance.
Well said. Ms. Moran?
I feel that it's the least invasive option, and I can appreciate and understand the need for caring for your parents, but also, giving them still their space and respect.
Great. And Mr. Rabimba, anything on to you?
No, I think the substantial justice point is clearly met here. The need to care for parents and inability to attach the unit on a second floor unit. It's a proper use of the piece of land, and I think it will be fair to ask for this.
Yeah, and personally myself, I like the idea of, even though it's far away, an ADU rather than looking to subdivide the land, to build a house to create, a situation for the elderly parents. So I do think it's a partial or a good request. So, with that, gets us to structuring the motion here. Is there anything that we feel that we need to add? We currently have it subject to obtaining all state and town permits and inspections. Mr. Mackey did note in the staff report, if approved, a state-approved septic system will be part of that as well. Do we feel that we need to add anything else to this motion? All right, well then with that, I think we are clear to come out of deliberative.
I'll make the motion.
Motion for Mr. Obemba, can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Second for Mr. Burgess. So that puts us on the table. All in favor of coming out of deliberative, say aye.
Aye.
All right, and Ms. Moran, you have a motion to read.
I do, thank you. I make a motion on case number 23-119, Promise Land Survey, LLC, owner James and Lisa Whiteneck, to grant a variance to the terms of Article 3, Section 165-25.e of the Town of Derry zoning ordinance to allow the construction of a detached accessory dwelling unit, ADU, on the property 112 Island Pond Road, parcel ID 06023-003, zoned LDR, as presented with the following conditions. We have 1, subject to obtaining all state and town permits and inspections, and that concludes the reading of the motion. I need a second.
I'll second that.
Got a second for Mr. Tripp, thank you. So with that will also bring us into the findings of fact. So it should be noted that the board found that the property is zoned LDR. The construction of ADUs are permitted in the town, providing that the regulations listed in the ordinance are met. The missing regulation is that the ADU must be attached or contained to the single-family house or dwelling. The applicant is requesting a variance to Article 3, Section 165.25.e, to allow the construction of a detached single-level ADU, as it was found to be unfeasible due to the retail shop and garden center with 2,000 square feet of living area above. And a state-approved septic system must be approved for the building. Does anybody have anything to add to this? All right. So please note, the board also includes all facts found in the meeting minutes for this application and incorporates all meeting minutes into its finding of facts and decisions. So with that, we are ready to move to a vote. Please note that voting yes is approving, and if voting no, you must state your reason for denial. So I will start to my far left, Mr. Obimba.
I vote yes.
All right, and Mr. Tripp,
I vote yes.
Ms. Moran,
Yes as well.
Mr. Burgess,
Although I'm not very fond of what I've seen, but I can't vote no. So I'm going to vote yes.
all right, and the acting chair will make it unanimous with the yes vote. So congratulations, Mr. Peliquin, and to James and Lisa Whiteneck, as your variance has been approved by a vote of 5-0. Please note that any aggrieved parties have 30 days to appeal this to the board, and then from there, all further action will be to Superior Court. Congratulations.
Good, thank you, Mr. Corbett.
Last case.
Put that on the wall.
I'm gonna put it on my fridge as soon as I get home. No, he's not getting that back.
Before we proceed with the next case, does anybody need any photos?
On me.
Photos?
Close
No?
that. Can I close it?
See again?
Right, photos.
Sure, I like pictures.
Very good. Pictures at 11. Okay.
Come on, I said 9 o'clock, guys.
All right, next case is Robert Cook in Molina Mavroforos. Case number 23-120. Feel free to correct me on my pronunciation.
Thank you. Chair, I'm going to sit so an alternate can sit for me, but I will still read the motion.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Donlin?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So, good evening, folks. And how do you pronounce the name?
Good evening. I'll let you. My name is Meredith Farrell Goldstein. I'm their attorney.
I see.
Rob Cook is my client, and Melina Mavroforos is his fiance. She's sitting right behind us here.
Good enough. And you are Attorney
Attorney Goldstein,
Goldstein, okay?
but you can call me Meredith. Please do.
I'm beginning to think this is the beginning of a movie. All right, well, very good. So, Attorney Goldstein, please, as you saw our protocols earlier, we prefer that you read your application as into the record to start, as it's presented, and then you have liberty to elaborate at your whim.
Sure. For time, our application is rather long. I'll try to summarize if that's all right with the board.
Just after you read the application?
The application also see letter of explanation.
I see.
Yeah. I'll try. You let me know if I should approach it differently than I do. But I was just going to let the board know a little bit about Rob and Melina first. They reside at 6 Abbott Street. They're actually getting married in a month. This is the first property they purchased together, and they've lived in town now for about 1.5 years there. They're requesting this variance because although a duplex is permitted in this area, the zoning has changed over the years, and the lot requirement there is now much larger than it was previously. I'm sure the board saw in our application that this property was a duplex up until 2018 when it was converted. So that is the reason for the variance. The lot size is just much smaller than what is required today. But I'll jump to those 5 factors for the board. So first, the variance will not be contrary to the public interest because there's no exterior changes being proposed. This is a very unique property that is essentially a duplex that was converted by just removing the dividing wall between the 2 units. Nothing on the exterior changed. The home, from an appearance perspective, looks the same as it always has. This is a neighborhood that is full of duplexes and multifamilies. I believe there's only one single-family home on this road. It's a very multifamily friendly neighborhood. And as far as the public interest goes, up until 2018, this was a duplex, and we have nothing to suggest that it was ever a conflict for the public interest. There's nothing to suggest it was ever negative. As for substantial justice, spirit of the ordinance, I'll go in order. As for the spirit of the ordinance, again, this is an area where duplexes are permitted and where there's several duplexes and multifamilies there, and they've been there for years. The only reason that this would be converse to the ordinance is because those lot size requirements have changed. Back when this home was built in 1909, the lot size requirements were very, very different, which can be seen by just looking at the neighborhood. Just to learn a bit more about the neighborhood, I went back and just looked at.
Sorry, Attorney Goldstein, if you try to just summarize, you can elaborate all into this after, but if you could just summarize each of the kind of the paragraphs for each
Sure.
one, that would be great, thank you.
Sure, I can move a little faster. So that's the spirit of the ordinance piece, just that it would fit the neighborhood here. The substantial justice will be done because it would allow the applicants to use this home as is intended. It's basically a duplex already. It would just be putting that dividing wall back up. As far as the value of the surrounding properties, again, this would not be converse to the character of the neighborhood. This is a multifamily, duplex-friendly neighborhood. It was a duplex for many, many years up until 2018. There's nothing to suggest there would be a negative impact now. And then for the hardship situation here, my clients bought this as a single-family home and tried to make it work, but they found that it's really a duplex. It was never completely converted. So they reached out to local contractors and said, okay, if we want to make this work as a single-family home, what do we need to do? Basically, they need to remove that staircase that we submitted a photo of and connect the upstairs living spaces there. To do that, they were quoted at about $50,000. To simply put the dividing wall back up and add that second kitchen back in, it's about $10,000 to $12,000. So it's a large financial difference for them. And it's really just the most reasonable solution here to return it to its previous status.
All right, that was a summary of all the 5 points listed, Mr. Chair, so I think we can, you wish we could probably go into a further elaboration, not to step on your toes.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Definitely a little bit different than
By
we're used to.
statute, we would like, you typically would want the 5 criteria in its exact replication read for the record, and then elaboration after that.
Sure.
I think there's a back and forth, but you're free to have the liberty to expand a little bit beyond that statute criteria.
Sure. So I think the key piece for us here is that this is a property that was a duplex up until 2018. It was there for over 100 years in that duplex status. The big piece of the zoning ordinance that is why we're here is because for a home on town water and sewer, we need more land under the zoning ordinance. But what's important for the board to know is that the sewer and water system never changed. It was never altered at all when the conversion occurred. So it can still handle a duplex. And there's nothing to suggest that it didn't work for the duplex up until 2018. There's never been any problems that we know of.
Well, understanding that in development regulations, you need less land mass if you have public water and sewer, correct?
Yes.
And that's that idea that somebody would have made this a single-family home and then converted to a private septic probably would be close to absurd, correct?
Sure.
So your client purchased this house a year ago?
Year and a half ago,
And,
winter of 22.
Probably at that time, we saw a lot of accelerated offers on purchases and sales?
Sure.
No home inspections? Do you have a home inspection?
We did have a home inspection.
So you had plenty of time to review the property and walk through it, and you saw the dual staircase.
That's correct.
The conversion of the property was taken from a single-family home to, or two-family to a single-family in 2018, correct?
Yes, they removed that dividing wall on the first floor and took out the second kitchen.
I think it makes a unique atmosphere for a family of small children, by the way, or with small children, based on the photos of the dual staircase. So, anybody have any questions?
I have a question for Mr. Mackey when we get to that point, but not yet.
Good
Yeah,
enough.
that's-
Anybody else, Mr. Tripp?
So you basically need how much square footage to be in compliance with the ordinance?
So the requirement is 10,000 per dwelling unit, so it'd be 20,000 here.
20,000 square feet, the
Yes.
lot side would be.
Yes.
So how big is the lot?
It's about 4,500 square feet.
So it's a considerable difference, but at least now we know what you're asking for. You know, you're asking for about 1,500 square feet. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Donlin?
I do have a couple questions. What would the plan be for the other unit, I assume, to rent it?
Yes, so essentially they're living on one of the upper units now, and the plan would be just to put that wall up and start renting out the other half to make some extra money.
And what does the parking situation look like on a 4,300 square foot lot?
I'm sorry, what was?
The parking situation?
Sure, so as I said, no changes were made to this before, when it was converted to a duplex. So the parking is the same. There's a very long driveway in the back there, on the left side of the property, looking at the photo on the screen, that extends back. You can get about 4 or 5 cars there, and then there's actually an inlet from it where you could get another 2 cars, and you can see that there's 2 parking spots in front as well.
I too have a question for Mr. Mackey, but I can wait.
Fair enough.
Can you move the view of the property so we can see the parking?
I'll tell you what, Mr. Mackey, we've had two folks who would like to stick to protocol and go right over to you. I appreciate that. It's less confusing, so why don't we go ahead with your input?
Okay, prior to questions, I guess. Again, property zoned MHDR, so the underlying zoning does allow for the creation of single families, 2 families, and multifamily. When we're dealing with 1 and 2 family dwellings, and again, on town water and town sewer, as most of these properties in the MHDR would be, but for a 1 and 2 family dwelling, it's 10,000 square feet per dwelling unit for land area. Obviously, they have about 4,500 here. So again, this would technically require 20,000 square feet. Multifamily is a little bit different. It's 5,000 square feet per dwelling unit, but the frontages are different and so forth. So our building file does show that there was a permit that was issued in 2018 to convert from the 2-family to a single family, which involved taking out some wall and removing the kitchen and so forth. So obviously, were this to be granted, they would need to get permits to reinstate that and get it on the record that it's now a 2-family dwelling. So with that, I'll take whoever had the questions.
Mr. Chair, I've got a pair.
Feel free.
All right, 2 for you, Mr. Mackey. So the first, the note had said that we're looking at the 10,000 square feet per dwelling, but the property in question was the 4,300. Is that each side 4,300, or should I really look at that as it being 4,300 versus 20,000 square feet total?
I think the total lot area is 4,300, so, yeah.
And then my second question, prior to it being changed from to the single family, was it a non-conforming structure, or when did the ordinance change to go from this 10,000 square feet per dwelling, for a 4,300 total to be on there?
Well, that MHDR zoning, again, was part of, well, with some little adjustments here and there, but that would have been part of the whole rezoning of the town, so probably took place in the late 80s or so when we went to MHDR and LMDR and MDR and all of that. So I mean, if this was built and as it was as a 2 back in the early 1900s, I mean, obviously, at that point, the zoning didn't come into effect till sometime in the 40s, so.
Understood. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Donlin?
So somebody filed paperwork to change a two-family to a single-family.
Correct, yeah, in 2018.
Everyone's got to be doing something.
It's a-
One question for the applicant. What's the name of the kitty on the side?
Was it a black kitty or is it white?
Tiger.
Multicolored.
Oh, yeah, that's Lisa. It's Lisa. She's about 7.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Very important.
It's a very swaying question, I will tell you. I was on the fence, now it's that clarifies for me.
I'll add that to my finding of fact.
We also have a small black kitten, it's about 6 months, so he's probably hiding somewhere too in one of those photos.
Yep. Mr. Moore?
At the moment.
Mr. Obimba?
Mr. Markey, when this was converted from dual to single, was it conforming for the single residency?
Well, no, because actually being converted, even at that point, the lot area would be undersized even for a single family, because again, the 10,000 square feet per dwelling unit.
Did they need a variance for that?
At the time, we didn't require the variance to convert from a 2 to a 1. I guess the thought at the time was it was becoming more conforming with regard to lot size.
Okay.
Anything else? All right. Very good. I guess we're all questioned out for now.
Oh,
You're not?
well, sorta. No, I'm thinking about things.
Okay.
Like maybe go to public input first? Want to go to public input first, or do you have it formed?
I don't know. I'm looking at this and thinking what you're saying about the conversion. If you can get that all done for 12 grand, you're lucky, because it's gonna cost more than that for doing the kitchen, I think. Quite a bit more. Plus, putting the wall up will probably be around 10 grand. So I don't know where you get your numbers from, but it's an oddball setup.
It is a very unique home.
And I can speak to the cost. When it comes to the restructuring of the staircase, that's just something that's completely out of my hands, something that would have to be fully structural. We'd likely have to get a large company out there with a large team, just because that is the center of the home, and a lot of the support structure is within that center wall. When it comes to creating that kitchen, a lot of that like carpentry work and stuff, can be done by me, so I won't have to pay for the labor. It'd be more so just.
It's just purchasing the equipment.
Exactly, yeah. And I
Well,
already have a
the
lot of-
cabinets and appliances cost a bunch of money
Yeah.
today, unfortunately.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's about it. I think I'm completely confused, but that's okay. This is one of those.
Mr. Mackey, I don't, we had a case a few weeks ago where an investment property had some surprises, but I'm just kind of spitballing here. You're going to convert this back to a two-family. If this board approves it, what kind of code changes are these folks looking at in that adoption?
Certainly, we'd have to take a look at what's there for the existing wall in between. Certainly what they would put back would be required to be a 1-hour rated wall between the fire separation wall between the two sides. Certainly complete smoke detection, carbon monoxide detection throughout the dwelling. If it's not already, that would have to be updated. Certainly when you're dealing with rental property, the rules are a little bit stricter. So those would be the primary things, I would think.
So it's certainly more than just putting up a petition wall at the bottom of the staircase.
And I don't know how the service, how the electrical, or whether it's two separate services, or how they would divvy with that, I'm not aware, so.
Yeah, we do still have 2 separate panels.
completely
Yep, and we still get billed for both 6 Abbott Street and 8 Abbott Street through Eversource.
Mr. Mackey, the part about the fire rating, would it have to take the current wallboards off from behind these stairs here? On the second floor also, to have the fire rated panels?
Well, you'd have
put
to
in?
have a continuous 1-hour separation.
Yeah.
So we'd have to determine where there's already a separation, what is that, and
Yeah.
then
Okay, so
see
you'd
what
have to
would have to be
reconstruct that
addressed.
if necessary.
Possibly, yeah.
Possibly, yeah. Okay.
All right. I'd like to follow up on a question previously asked about the parking. The primary parking is in the rear?
So the parking, this is actually a bit of an outdated photo. So there is that one long strip directly to the left of the property.
Essentially a driveway?
Yeah, so that driveway actually leads into the backyard where there's extra spaces, a couple spaces where you can actually put up to 2 cars. And then there is this lower level, or this basically like tiered driveway, and then above that rock wall, there's another gravel driveway there now that was there prior to us moving in. So we actually have 3 spaces from the roadway, and then the leftmost space goes very deep, so you can park multiple tandem cars.
I think this street view is from 2011. So when they purchased the property, there were 2 spots already there in the front.
Yeah. So part of that front yard as well is another spot.
So that would be another condition that would have to be met if it's going to be multiple family housing, is additional parking.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, when you're dealing with 1 and 2 family, obviously, when you get into multifamily, there's parking. It's
Yeah.
1.5 spaces per bedroom and so forth. So you have to have a certain number of spaces. Those really don't apply to single families and 2 families, but logically, you have to provide enough parking. And based on the number of bedroom units, you want to provide, I'm assuming, at least a couple spaces per side.
Sure.
For a couple bedroom duplex.
Yeah, the intention is that the 2 spots in the front yard there would be for the rightmost unit, and then the tandem spots where you can fit multiple vehicles would be for the leftmost.
Yeah, because you don't want anybody parking in the driveway.
What's that?
You don't want anybody parking in the driveway, right?
Yeah.
And looking at the unit next door, the multifamily next door, that's kind of how this was set up. It is the driveway in a way, but in this area, they're really using that as parking at these units. But like you said, it can be divided with the 2 parking spots. They actually have room for a 3rd parking spot in the front as well, to have 3 for 1 unit and then the full driveway for the other. And by driveway, I do mean behind, all the way back there, and then there are the 2 more spots too.
Thank you.
All set?
Did we establish how many units each side would be? Bedrooms? Did anyone ask that yet?
There's 2 bedrooms on both sides.
2.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Everybody all set? All right, let's go to public. Anybody out there that wishes to speak in favor of this application, this would be your opportunity to do so. Likewise, we have, you've got the phone numbers up there, Ms. Preventure, I assume? Okay, very good. Mr. Corby, you want to read those numbers?
Yep, anybody at home who wishes to dial in, please dial 646-558-8656. Your meeting ID is 323-909-140. Press star 9 to raise your hand. If you're having any technical issues, please dial 603-845-5585.
Very good. You have anybody out there, Mr. Preventure? All right, very good. No one rose here in the room for that call. So anybody who would like to speak in opposition, the call is being made now, both within the room and remotely. This would be your opportunity to speak. No one there again, Mr. Prevention?
Seeing none, Mr. Chair.
All right, very good. So we'll consider that we've met the statutes there for public input. And you folks have anything left you'd like to add?
I'll just note again, I was about to talk before about the neighborhood itself. This is a neighborhood full of multifamilies and duplexes. All of them were built way back when, so none of them are meeting that lot requirement, and that's the character of the neighborhood. So any concerns about that lot size impacting the neighborhood, really, in our view, are minor, because that's how the neighborhood was designed. And this is a very small lot, as most of the lots in the area are.
Very good.
Just for, I'm probably gonna ruin it anyhow when I say it, but how do you pronounce your last name? Mavroparos. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. All right, well, we've met public input, so anybody would like to take us to the deliberation, and we can get there.
So moved.
All right,
Second.
I'll second it.
I think Tripp got it.
Mr. Tripp moved that point of view, and I think Mr. Donlin seconded it. Go to deliberation. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Does anybody have a concern about the square footage requirement for this conversion, whereas the property is dated as it is, and this was a formerly functioning two-family facility at one time?
I do.
Yep.
And while recognizing that, I could see Mr. Mackey's point of where in 2018, the town likely felt that it was going from very non-conforming to slightly less non-conforming with the change. But where I struggle, or really struggle, is that the jump, I originally read it as the 4356 versus 10,000 square feet. Good size jump there, at about 44%. But to the 4,400 versus 20,000 square feet, that's really where I struggle when it's, that big of a gap. It's a small property, and I just I have a tough time seeing two-bedroom dwelling units in it, or in the fact that it existed before is just kind of it's tough. I've been in small places before, but it's a tough space.
Anybody else?
I certainly put value, or for lack of a better term, value in the fact that it wasn't existing prior. I mean, I certainly wouldn't look at it the same way as someone requesting like a permit to build this dwelling on this lot. For, 100 years, it was what it was.
If you
Granted,
look
there were horses walking down the street then, but.
If you look at spirit of the ordinance and creation of zoning and its evolvement, it's often can be a cure or remedy, and leaves certain parcels on a outdated situation. So when you're looking at 5 criteria, you're looking at spirit of the ordinance, you can evaluate the timeline of this, and I'm just devil's advocate, by the way. You can look at the timeline of when the creation of the zoning was and what its intention was. At one point, there was general construction in the community, which oversaturated certain housing, but at some point, the intention was to start to cure that general construction and create remedies to prevent that, which leaves this parcel in an outdated but non-conforming situation. So I think that bears some consideration in that. That's certainly how I'm leaning. Anybody wish to follow up on that?
To a point Mr. Donlin made earlier, that people do things. I'm with him on that. I'm having a tough time comprehending why somebody made the switch and then just sold the property. That it doesn't seem like they did anybody in the future any service with that. I am baffled. I mean, I still think it's a little small, but I don't understand the conversion in the first place.
Well, you think about 2018, I can't speak to who lived there, but certainly 2018, and a year later, the world's starting to change, and then that change evolves into another change in real estate where there's hyperinflation, and someone says, you know, we decided not to have a two-family in this and enjoy the home on our own with a dual staircase. But then all of a sudden, the accelerated value comes in and they say, let's get out of here now. So for me, that's a simple explanation. Maybe not. Maybe it was something different, but it fits the timeline. I'm not too, I certainly am puzzled by this as well. Why someone would take an income property out and take it out of income. But, you know, an income revenue generating parcel.
Well, what also jumps out at me with, you know, with that too, and to that point of how it went, the owner who would have done it, they sold in 2019. So there was another owner there in between who was out within, you know, if these people have owned it for 18 months, I'm going to say 2021, this person owned the house for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And either was looking just to flip it in general or realized that it wasn't working.
Yeah.
You know, so not that I can figure out an assumption just based off a name on a piece of paper, but you know, it's just something to consider. It just seems like a strange history.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of speculating completely, but he could have bought the thing not doing the due diligence and went, whoa, cut ties and run.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess in the end, you have to set that aside, right? And we can't be fortune tellers or whatever,
Right.
but, and go back to the 5 criteria. And spirit of the ordinance is not always the strongest argument of out of the 5, but it bears considering when you're looking at the evolution of the zoning versus the square footage requirement for the lot size. Mr. Burgess, you have anything you wish to add?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
You know, it's just one of those, it's hard to fathom. Yeah, I agree with the first part, that they, I don't know why they ever took it out of rental, but there are some people who don't like to have people living with them. They'd rather have a nice private residence, and that's it. So,
Mr. Tripp?
Well, I really don't have that much problem with the undersized lot, because this is a pre-existing condition. And it's one of those things that the spirit of the ordinance is sometimes almost as hard to fathom as why they took a family and converted it to a 1. You know, I suspect the reason for the 10,000 feet per each unit was to knock the density down. Well, you're not going to knock the density down here because it is what it is. You know, so like I said, I don't have that big a problem with the lot not meeting the lot size.
How about substantial justice? Is there any substantial justice by allowing this? Mr. Corbett?
yeah, I'm not.
I'm struggling, where I struggle with it is that the substantial justice personally that I see is that without it being done this way, I don't see the value in the house. So I feel that leaving it in its current, I think the spirit of the ordinance is, you know, I can make that argument it's met because it doesn't meet the square footage at all. It's way under, but as far as substantial justice, it feels like you're then I don't know. I guess I just have a tough time with it. I can't quite see if it's holding up because, you know, to the point you don't want the smaller things, but I don't see it benefiting a landowner on this situation.
Is there substantial justice in allowing a property, a home that has 2 odd staircases, as it formerly was,
Breakers.
to be brought back to its former design? if you think about it, and you went to and I can think of this from the code enforcement side, right? Mr. Mackey, you go into the building and you go, okay, well, it's a single family, but you got a unique staircase. You didn't want to change that? And so this is, that staircase kind of keeps this in a midstream. It's been changed to a single family in one sense, but it's still a two-family in spirit. We see a lot of that going on in society currently.
I think what we're also seeing is from the depiction, and maybe I should have asked it prior to deliberative, because you bring up a good point, but when you look at these photos, it looks like they only took down the wall on the first floor. So that kind of leads me to believe the second floor is still like, to your joke of this is a great place for kids, you're giving the kids an apartment right off the bat, if you were to give them their own bedroom.
Well, this is,
You know, like, you have to go downstairs to go back upstairs to allow them to quiet down.
yeah, according to this picture, it looks like they, you know, they've got one room in the back, unless it's downstairs existing, it says.
Yeah,
Doesn't
that's the
tell you
first
which
floor.
it's existing of, yeah. If
Maybe,
it's-
maybe that's
then
because
this
they
is the
wanted people to
second.
get their steps in every day.
I mean, to your point, Mr. Chair, I think
It's odd.
from a substantial justice standpoint, without making the case, the intent, obviously the intent of this building was to be a two-family.
At one point.
I feel that, yeah, to really make this a single family, you have to gut it, like, you have to completely gut this house to do what got the transition, in my opinion. And I think what happened previously, which just wasn't, I don't want to say it was a rubber stamp, I don't want to discredit or disrespect anybody, but it seemed, you know what I mean? It doesn't seem like the proper vetting of at least the owner to turn something into a single family, and it's almost like they kind of just, excuse the language, this half-assed it, they just took out a wall and deemed it one family. They didn't do what needed to be done.
Well, they took the wall in the kitchen out.
Right, but like you
Yeah.
said, they two electrical, so they're getting electrical bills for two properties still, and, you know, just a lot that wasn't, I don't know. I think if you were gonna do it, you really needed to do it right.
So how about the values to surrounding properties? Would they be diminished if you put this back to a two-family?
It's not gonna change the exterior of the property, so I don't know.
I don't think so.
How about in regards to the parking?
I do see that, I have some apprehension to that is in, 10 or 15 years from now, when they maybe are looking at this more of a two rentals and they're moving into somewhere with the white picket fence and their kids, and as their lives move on, that it could turn into a situation. Not that that couldn't necessarily be remedied with some creative work in the meantime, so that there is, at least four non-stacked parking spots that would at least give one per bedroom, which is reasonable considering the size of the lot. Not gravel in the front yard necessarily.
Mr. Tripp, you have a thought on that?
What, on the parking?
On the diminution of surrounding properties?
I don't believe it's going to diminish the value of the properties.
Okay. Mr. Burgess, any thoughts there?
Well, yeah, that's what I just said. It's doesn't look like it's going to diminish the property because of the fact that it's gonna be the same building. With, two sides to it, like it was previously, but
About the public interest?
that's,
Let's dissuade on the public interest side.
I don't think it's in the public interest in one respect, because of the property size.
If there was 3% of this house's existence has been as a single family, so if there was
It's short for single family even, but it's really short if you're considering it's supposed to be 20,000 square feet for a duplex or a two-family.
If the argument that you'd make in the public, if you wanted to make one in the public interest, is what we've heard from, our economic advisory committee, that the smaller studio apartments are what's needed for the workforce, right? And not to
And
say
there's
that
the
these are
other
studio apartments, but the size that you're getting, it's pretty close to, the post-grad living so to speak.
Well, and then when you look at the creation of the master plan and those other supportive documents, one of the things that you're looking for is walking distance to downtown.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
And to support business growth. Mr. Tripp, am I correct? You were presiding on the town council at that time when those discussions went on? Those ideas, I should say?
Well, yeah, but once again, those ideas were to guide the development of additional housing in the town. What you have here is you have properties that are, like I said, they are what they are. They're,
Yeah, then there's the
there was probably no, lot size requirement when this building was put up, and maybe there might have even been another building in between the two buildings here, and it was torn down, and now somebody has grass to mow. Having grass to mow is not always the best thing in the world. Like I said, in my opinion, the spirit of the ordinance was to decrease density in the neighborhoods. And what we have here is a situation where in order to decrease density, we'd have to tear the house down, and I don't think that's the solution, in the housing market nowadays. So, yes, that's why zoning boards of adjustments exist, to give, relief from some of the ordinances that have changed since the buildings are, built. So, like I said, I don't have any problem with, giving the 15, the relief to the lot size, once we already know what it is, because you have to make a decision based on facts, not, oh, it's not that much. Not that much is a bad decision, so, I think that, right now, you guys probably don't go in the other half of the house, so it's unused, property that could be used, in the town, to let people, have housing,
And is that the answer to the substantial justice, public interest,
I believe so.
and spirit of the ordinance? Spirit of the ordinance is that the creation of the zoning, currently the zoning district was created well after this home
Yeah.
and the situation was there. How about hardship? Is there a hardship here? Mr. Donlin?
I mean, they certainly can't utilize the property as is intended originally. I would classify that as a hardship.
Okay, Mr. Tripp?
I would agree, because if you're probably a little tight with money, if you've got this building that is a income producer that you're not using as income producing. I don't know what your intent was when you purchased the home or the building, but it was probably in the back of your mind that, hey, we could rent half of this out if we put the wall back up, so.
Let's just remember that we're in deliberation.
I remember.
Mr. Burgess, hardship?
I don't see a hardship.
Okay. And Mr. Corbett?
Yeah, I don't think the house functions as it currently is, as I've stated. I think it needs a full gut to exist as a single family, so I think the hardship I see is that it doesn't function as intended.
All right, very good. So we've gone through all 5 of the criteria. Let's look at structuring the motion. We have the subject to obtaining all state and town permits and inspections. Anybody else have anything else they would want to add to this? Just a gesture, Mr. Mackey, is there any other TRC or planning board review with this?
Not for this particular application.
Very good, okay. Anybody else have any conditions to this motion they'd want to see?
No, not this time. And if denied, is it in our purview to say to reset it from the two electrical, the two addresses that's on the electrical bill, or is that completely outside of us?
It's outside
Yeah,
of
so
us.
then I have nothing.
Okay, good enough. Mr. Donlin, you all set there?
Yes, sir, Mr.
Great.
Chair.
Sounds like we have a motion structured and we're ready to move out of deliberation. If I could have some assistance there, please.
I'll make a motion to come out of deliberative session.
Mr. Donlin, second, please.
Second it?
Mr. Tripp has a second. All in favor of coming out of deliberation, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Hearing none, Mrs. Moran, you have a motion to read.
I do, thank you. I make a motion on case number 23-120, Robert Cook and Melina Mavroforas, to grant a variance to the terms of Article 6, Section 165-45.b.1.a.ii of the Town of Derry zoning ordinance to allow the conversion of the existing single-family home back to a two-family dwelling at 6 Abbott Street, parcel ID 32108, zoned MHDR, as presented with the following conditions. We have 1, subject to obtaining all state and town permits and inspections, and that concludes the reading of the motion. I need a second.
Second.
Mr. Donlin has a second on the motion. That motion's on the floor, and now we'll read in for the finding of fact. Mr. Corbett?
The board found that the property is located in the MHDR zone. The applicant is requesting to convert the single-family house back to its previous status as a two-family dwelling. The property was built in 1909 and reclassified to a single-family in 2018. The property does not meet the lot requirements for a two-family within the MHDR zone, 4,356 square feet versus 20,000 total. The property is located in a mixed-use area that contains a mix of multifamilies, two-family, and single-family dwellings. Does anybody have anything to add to this?
Seeing no gestures, we'll move all in favor of moving forward with a vote.
Just note that we're also including all facts found in the meeting minutes for the application and incorporating all of those minutes into our finding of facts and decisions.
And accepting the finding of facts, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. I'll poll the board. Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
I'm very concerned about the size. However, I think restoring it back to the two-family is the correct move for the property, so I also vote yes.
Very good. Mr. Burgess?
I am also concerned with the size, but I guess I'm going to vote yes.
Very good. Mr. Donlin?
Yes.
Very good. The chair will make it unanimous as well. Not an easy task either way you're going to go, but anybody aggrieved by this has 30 days to ask this board for a rehearing. After that, recourse would be to Superior Court, so good luck.
Thank you so much.
All right, have a good evening.
You as well.
Gonna test your
Yeah.
marriage right away.
Next to no time.
Planning a wedding and a house remodel. Good luck.
All right. So to the board's attention, the only other business that we have is the semi-monthly Town and Country magazine, and next up is the approval of minutes from June 15th,
Further other
2023.
business, just a reminder to read through the case forwarded for our appeal up at Superior Court that was sent out last week as part of our continued training.
Very good. Hopefully, everybody has taken the time. It's 15 minutes, I think, 18 minutes to watch Supreme Court case as well. And that appeal is still waiting for judgment from the Supreme Court. And so anyway, approval of minutes from June 15th, 2023.
As amended.
As amended. Can I have a motion to accept as amended, please?
I'll make the motion
To accept as
accept
amended?
the minutes as
second.
amended.
Okay, very good. And Mr. Corbett as a second. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. After that, we have anything lining up for next month?
I don't believe any cases have come in, although I've talked to several people that I do expect by the deadline, we should have something for the meeting in August, yeah.
Well, these months off takes a toll, I tell you. It's, especially with the work week I've had. But anyway, if there's no other comments or business, we can take a motion to exit the room.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Mr. Burgess has the motion to adjourn, say aye. I mean, I need a second.
Second.
Aye, second by Mr. Donlin. Now we can have an all in favor to adjourn.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we're adjourned.